welcome back to Knitting 101. Today is your first lesson, and what we're going to be covering today is casting on. Casting on is the term that we use for the process of getting the stitches onto the needle so then we can knit them. There are a variety of ways to cast on. Depending on the kind of project you're working on, you may use different techniques. What I'm going to teach you today is a kind of all-purpose cast on that you can use for most projects. It is called the long tail cast on. It is very easy to work, but it will take some practice to get used to doing the motions to get those stitches onto the needle. So grab the worsted weight yarn and the US 7 or 8 needles that you picked up at your local craft store, or perhaps ordered online, and we will go ahead and get started. Okay, we're ready to learn to cast on. To cast on, you only need one needle, so you can just set the other one aside. And then the first thing you're going to do is just pull off a length of yarn from your ball of yarn. At this point, it doesn't matter how much yarn, since you're just practicing. After I finish the demonstration, I'm going to give you a little tip for estimating the amount of yarn that you'll need when you're working on an actual project. But in this case, you're going to pull off a length of yarn and kind of in the middle, you're going to make a knot. So just wrap around 2 fingers. And in here is where you're going to put the needle. And you pull tight, and that is your first stitch. That's the easy part. The yarn that is attached to the ball of yarn, we're going to call that the working yarn. That's going to be on your left side. The yarn that is free, that's the tail end yarn. That's going to be on your right side. Okay, so the first step here is going to be to tension your yarns, which is basically a unnecessarily fancy way of saying holding them so that you can use them. Some people maybe just do one finger, just do the ring finger. I will do both and use ring and pinky finger to hold the yarn against my palm, and I do the same thing on the other side. So you use these 2 fingers, or maybe just one. You'll learn with practice what works best for you, so that most importantly, your forefinger and your thumb are free. All right, so let's start with the left hand. We're holding our yarn with our pinky finger and ring finger. Thumb and index finger are free. And what we're going to do is to wrap the yarn around our thumb like this. All right, so you can see again, I've still got the yarn here between the ring and pinky finger pressed against the palm. So it's not all loose and floppy. It's not super tight, but it's tensioned neatly. And we've wrapped it around the thumb. So again, you're gonna pull the thumb over so that the yarn wraps around it like that. On the other side, again, you have the yarn held against your palm, the tail end of the yarn, and you're just going to put your index finger under it. So, no fancy loop on this side. This side, fancy loop. All right, so we have our fancy loop. We have the tail end of the yarn wrapped around our index finger. You can see I'm using thumb and middle finger to hold the needle. Now we're going to start the actual casting on. Take the tip of your needle and move it under this loop. Keep your thumb in there, wrap the yarn around with your other hand, and then pop that loop over the tip of the needle and pull tight. So that's the second stitch. So again, I'm going to wrap the working yarn around the thumb, still holding the tail end of the yarn over your index finger. Insert the needle from below up into this loop. Keep your thumb there. Wrap the
tail end of the yarn around your needle. So you're wrapping it around the back, over to the front, then use your thumb to pop that loop over and pull tight. That's 3. Under to make the loop. Insert your needle from the bottom. And you can see I'm using my thumb to hold the needle in place while I do the next step, but I'm making sure that that loop of yarn stays over it. Wrap around the back of the needle and over to the front, and then use my thumb to pop that loop over the top of the needle and off and pull tight. And I'll show a little bit more how this would go in real time. I know that looks fast, but knitting, kind of like typing or learning to play the guitar or the piano, involves muscle memory. So eventually, your hands are going to be able to do this all by themselves. You really won't have to think about it very much, but it takes a lot of practice to get there. So I'm going to show you one more time from the beginning without the narration, so you can really focus on the process. And that's it. That's how you cast stitches onto your needle. Once you have the correct amount of stitches on your needle for whatever project you're working on, you'll be able to get started.
Now, as I said, the long tail cast on is a good all-purpose cast on for most kinds of projects that you might be interested in learning. The trickiest part of it is estimating how much yarn you're going to need to work the cast on. When you begin knitting a project, it will tell you to cast on a certain number of stitches, and you need to know how much yarn that's going to take. It's always better to have too much than too little, but you also don't want to waste yarn. So I just wanted to go over a quick trick that's going to help you estimate the amount of yarn you'll need. As you become more practiced as a knitter, you won't need to do this anymore. You'll get much better at eyeballing it. But for now, you're going to start by casting on 10 stitches, and then you're going to take a marker and draw a little dot on the first stitch and the last stitch of those 10. There we go. Then you're going to take them off the needle and see the distance between them. All right, so this is how much yarn I needed to cast on 10 stitches. So now I know if I need to cast on 30 stitches, I need 3 times this much yarn before I get started. And then of course, you'll also want a little extra just to be safe. So if you don't want these dots on your project, you can cut the yarn there and start over. But now you have an estimate of the amount of yarn that you're going to need for your long tail cast on. All right, so that was the long tail cast on. Again, that is an all-purpose cast on method that will work for most knitting projects. And that is the first step you have to learn in order to start knitting. So check back tomorrow for lesson 2, and we will be working on the knit stitch. See you then.